So, hello, we are here with Kristen Guest. She is a student of ours. And hello, Kristen, how are you?
Hi, I'm
Hi.
good.
So, we wanted to bring Kristen on to talk a little bit about her story, about the journey she's gone on, because it's really been amazing. It's been amazing to work with Kristen. It's been amazing to watch her transformation as she has really taken hold of what we've taught her and really made it her own and really seized her dreams through doing this. So, are you ready to get started?
Let's go.
Okay, so great. So, um, let's start with, if you could, just describe your writing situation when you first met Thomas.
So I was, I guess, like a lot of people, I had written a lot when I was a teenager. And then I went off to university and I was in university for a really long time. I did a PhD. So I was in my mid 30s by the time I came out of that process and finally had a job that would allow me to financially get back into horses.
Right.
And so I was about 35 and I went looking for a horse. And like most people, when they're doing that, I bought probably completely the wrong horse. So I bought my thoroughbred, Griffin,
Mhm.
and we sort of started out and I had this idea that I wanted to ride dressage. I'd been at the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto and I'd seen Reiner Klipke
Oh,
riding his horse and I, in the warm I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. I want to do that. And so, so I started out, I had my 7-year-old off the track thoroughbred, uh, Charles de Comfy's book of manege exercises and Reiner Klimke's training for the young horse. And I set out to try to do this. And of course, it was a complete, train wreck. Um, because I didn't have any of the knowledge to implement any of their very good ideas. And it's I sort of went at it in almost a ticky box kind of way. Do this, do this, do this, and
yeah.
of course that doesn't really produce anything. So, but I went along and I took some lessons from local people, and so that the second year I owned Griffin, we went out and showed training level, and it went okay. We had some ribbons and we had some good days and we had some bad days and we had a lot of fun. And then I moved up to first level and and the wheels started to fall off. And I never really got past first level with him over about the next 3 or 4 years, or well, it was probably about 3 years. And I worked with a number of professionals up where I live, and really quickly I was sort of told this horse has no talent, and you're never going to get anywhere on him, and you need another horse. So after a really, I guess, frustrating and terrible
Yeah.
show season, like where I spent a lot of time crying in the trailer and getting really bad remarks from judges, it was really hard and it was frustrating. And I didn't, you don't know why. You're trying and you're trying and you're doing what people are telling you to do, and then you go and show, and it completely backfires, and you don't know why it's not working. And so I got told, well, you just have to get another horse. So I went and got a schoolmaster, very talented, had been doing the small tour in Florida, but had been completely, so he had a completely ruined hock, but he was still rideable. So I brought him home, and he was a really nice horse, and I learned a ton from him, but I did not actually learn, I think, any of the things that I was, that go with the model of go by a schoolmaster. So it wasn't that he taught me how to ride shoulder in and half pass and how to feel this or that. Like I was sort of riding him around like a monkey, and he was just doing what he did. And he was really talented and really, you know, good natured. So he just rode through movements with me. Um, but one of the things that I kind of learned as I went on with that was that all the problems that I had with Griffin I had with the schoolmaster too.
Oh.
It's just he was so fancy. He was so fancy that people didn't notice, right? So when I looked at the pictures of me riding him, I thought, he's not supple. And I don't know how to get him supple, but he looks not supple. And Griffin, it was really easy to tell that he was not supple because he didn't move like he was on a trampoline all the time. So the schoolmaster didn't last very long. He was rideable for about a year and a half. And we had to retire him, and I sort of had a whole bunch of things come together where I thought my dressage dream was done. I really felt like I'd hit the end of the road because no one up here would work with me with the horse that I had. I'd spent, more money than I was probably comfortable with buying a horse that I only got a year and a half worth of riding out of, and I couldn't go back to the financial well and get another one, which is sort of the assumption in dressage, right? Like just go get another one.
Exactly. Exactly. You use up one horse, you just go.
I didn't have
put down a bunch more money and buy another. Yeah. Yeah.
So I sort of said to people, like, okay, this is I did what you said, and this is the horse that I have, so help me. And it sort of tanked. Like I was on my own. So the summer of 2009, I was really thinking that I was just done with dressage, that it was, that this was it. And this email came across my desk through a horse list I'm on, that there was a clinic in Edmonton, Alberta, which is about 10 hours away from where I live. And it was an in-hand clinic. And I thought, well, that's not really what, I don't really do that. And I'm not really, I don't know. But the guy's bio sounded really interesting. So I never heard of this Thomas Ritter guy, but I really liked the bio. And then I thought, it's summer, it's 10 hours away, we're in the middle of haying. It's probably, probably not worth it. Anyway, it's going to be an in-hand clinic. And so I just sort of walked away. And then the email came back. They circulated it again. And I thought, okay, like you say you want to learn. This sounds interesting. I know you got, I thought, this is probably too fancy for my thoroughbred to go to. It'll be embarrassing, but so what? Like, let's put him on the trailer and go do this. So we did. And there were a lot of fancy horses there. And I'm pretty sure that the last person you ever thought would follow you home from that clinic was me.
Hey.
But that clinic kind of completely blew my mind. Like it was what I'd been looking for in Charles de Confi and the books and the lessons and the clinics and it just nothing that people were doing made any sense. I had a ton of lessons where they put you on a 20-meter circle and they yell, inside rein, outside rein, half ball, forward. And, and nothing happens when you do that. And so at Thomas's clinic, it was a 3-day clinic. The first day, all we did was walk. And he put me on the lunge line, not the horse, me. He clipped the lunge line to my boot and he said, okay, you go on a 20-meter circle, and I don't want the lunge line. It can't go slack, and you can't pull on it. It has to be perfectly even the whole time. And that was so hard. So I'm on the lunge line. I'm trying to do this. Like, it's taking every bit of concentration I have to walk my horse, and the lunge line's going all over the place. But eventually, as we kind of got it, and of course he's telling me to do he's doing other things while this is going on, so he's teaching me how to do that and geometry and stepping at the same time. And by the end of 45 minutes, that horse was relaxed, he was straight, and he was on the bit magically. And he'd always had huge contact problems. He hid behind the contact. He had a really dysfunctional relationship to the bit. But I was in the right position, he was in the right position, and it just works. And I realized, like, that's it. That's what you have to do. It's not yanking on the front end or kicking the back end. It's about getting everything in the place it needs to be. Right. So the second day we trotted, and the third day, Thomas used the straightness to start flying changes. Yeah. So I was thrilled with, the flying changes were fun, but what really kind of grabbed me, and I sort of spent the whole 10 hours on the way home with my head spinning, thinking like this is what I need to do, this is what I'm looking for. And so I was on sabbatical that year, which was nice. So I emailed, I sort of cold call emailed you guys and said, I was at your clinic, I was riding a great thoroughbred. Can I come and train with you for a month? And it just sort of worked out that you were pregnant with Dylan at the time, and so Thomas said I took October off. So if you want to come down, come down. And I think it was one of those things where, like with the email, sometimes you get these opportunities and you just have to grab them. Right. Like if I hadn't grabbed that when it went by, it would have passed and the opportunity would have been gone. But it was like I just said, yeah.
It's not very often that he takes a whole month off. Yeah.
No, well, he's constantly busy, and then you move back to Germany. So really, there was a very short window when this would have even been possible, and I just grabbed it. And so we we loaded up the horse and the camper, and we came down and lived in the parking lot for a month. But I have to tell you, so while we're driving down to Oregon, we get to Eugene, and it had been sort of cloudy and a little bit rainy, and then all of a sudden there was this gigantic rainbow right in front of us into the ground, and I was like, this is it. This is it. Like, we're gonna go through.
It's a sign.
It was funny. It was right where we were going, and that's kind of exactly where it turned out. That was the beginning of everything. Like when I thought I was down, when I thought that's really it, I want to ride dressage, and this is never going to happen. And even at your clinic, I was talking to someone who is a big Canadian trainer who had an extremely fancy horse, and I was sort of saying, wow, what a beautiful horse, and how do you get to FEI, and I don't like what's the there's this huge gap between being a lower level rider and getting there. And she said, well, you'll just never ride enough horses to get that done. And that was sort of part of it, like how am I gonna make this happen? And so we came down, and I think how you make it happen is you just start. You don't say, oh, I got to have the right horse, or I got to have the right people in my backyard, or I got to have this, or I got to have that. I think you just, when opportunities come, you grab them, and then you just start doing it. And I think, I was really lucky, because while I was in Oregon working with you, I had the chance to have the one-on-one, like the seat work, and you completely, it was like Navy SEALs training. You completely, dismantled my seat and put it back together again.
Remember that.
And did a similar thing with the horse, and it was so funny because at the end, like at the beginning of the first week when you started on my seat stuff, I remember getting back on Griffin, and I couldn't walk on the bit. Like, because it was so foreign, because my balance was so different, I couldn't do anything. Like I could not get him to do the most basic stuff that we've been doing all the way along. And instead of it feeling terrible, I was elated. I was like, because I wasn't alone, right? Like I knew that, like I had total faith that all I had to do was just keep going, and that it was going to work out. And that
it was making sense to you too. What you were doing was making sense.
Yeah, this starting over is sometimes necessary, and it's disorienting because nothing is where it used to be. All the body parts are in different places. You're using totally different muscles. Other muscles you've always used are now off limits. You can't use them. that's why you feel like you can't do anything. And the horses are in the same position when you really fundamentally change their balance. In a retraining horse, for example, they feel just as weird and off, and helpless maybe. And once they start to feel where the feet are, exactly, very disoriented. But once they find their feet again, and then they find which muscles they need to use to balance themselves, then they gain confidence, and then they can perform at a much higher level than they did before. It's just the transition is always a little challenging, and it's something also you can't do with every rider. Not everybody is like mentally strong enough or trusts you enough to go through with that. And you need this chunk of time where you can really work on it consistently, because it's really dismantling everything and putting it back together in a slightly different order.
Yeah, and it's not a one-time deal. So that was the most dramatic one, but over the course of my subsequent time riding with you, it's happened a bunch of times. And you just have to embrace it, that it's going to take you somewhere.
You have to
so I got that opportunity.
You have to re-examine the foundation sometimes. I used to do that too when I was young, constantly take myself apart, put it back together, because I always felt like with the seat I have now, with the way I'm riding now, I can get up to a point, up to a limit, and then there's a ceiling, and I can't get past that ceiling. So I feel like I have to take everything apart. It's like I always pictured, an old car that you take apart and spread all the pieces out, and then you have to look which pieces are broken, which pieces are still workable,
which pieces do I need to replace or upgrade.
Exactly. And every 6 months or so, I used to go through that process, and it was terribly humbling and painful for the ego, at first. And eventually you realize it's actually a good thing, because it means you're learning something.
And you get used to the process,
exactly.
You recognize it. So you say, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but this is the process.
What's interesting, your background story is very typical. That's something we heard hundreds of times, thousands of times from riders, especially in the US and Canada. In Europe, it's maybe not quite the same, but in North America, that's like almost everybody's story.
And
they
Australia,
in Australia
and South Africa, we're hearing that a lot too.
It's always, the girls ride as kids and teenagers, and they go to college, and a lot of them have a family, and then once they're established professionally, or once the kids are grown and the husband has a good job, or whatever that scenario is, they have time and they have money to ride. And then they buy a horse, and then they go through the same thing. Nothing works, and it's the same thing. I buy my horse, I buy a couple of good books or whatever, ride with the trainers, and then it doesn't work. And the trainer tells you need a different horse, you need to import something, and then that doesn't work out for various reasons. And so it's the struggle is the same, and basically up to that point where we met, it's your typical adult amateur tale of woe in a way, right? And then you turn it around. And I think in a way what sets you apart is that you were maybe more determined than most, or not easily dissuaded, and you have a good sense of an opportunity. You recognize an opportunity when it comes along. Most people in your situation would have passed on that email when it says work in hand clinic and you're not really interested. They wouldn't drive 10 hours. I mean, here in Germany, a lot of people don't want to drive for 1 hour because they think it's too long, because they're not used to that. Yeah, and of course in Canada, an hour is like, same town, basically. It's nothing, right? But I think that's remarkable that you recognized the opportunity and that you were willing to do whatever it took. Like, I don't care if I have to drive 10 hours to Edmonton or 24 hours to Eugene. I'll just do it because that's what I want to do. I think that's really important. That's the main ingredient in success, to do those things.
Yeah, and I think that you've got to it takes a long time to so my overnight success story is not overnight at all. It's there was then I think like about 7 years of work between that time and now with you. And a lot of it was picky and slow and boring. I don't find the little stuff boring, but I know that anybody sitting on the rail watching me do most of what I do would say nothing's happening here. it's really just committing to, you know, to kind of a Zen embrace of the smallest details, and of being really fearless about acknowledging what you don't know, and taking responsibility for you. Like, so you can't, you know, Thomas's big thing is, you know, it's not the saddle or the bit or the farrier or the, you know, it's like, it's where am I in this with the horse? And I think that, you know, and then you have to accept sort of the limits of the situation. So Griffin, you know, went on to, by the time I retired him, and so we worked from 2009 to 2012. So it was really not even a long period of time it took to do this. He went from being a first level horse to being a horse who could do a number of parts of the I1. But he was never going to be a show horse. I was never going to get my big, you know, triumph and haha to the world, look, I've done it. Like, that wasn't going to happen with him. He was just there to help me.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was really pivotal in me learning any number of things. Like, he was the best teacher you could possibly have had in some ways, because it was not easy. But, you know, that came with, you know, some really wonderful highs and some limits that I just had to recognize. But what it did was, it, you know, that experience set up the second horse, who doesn't have those limits. And so the process of you know, working my way from backing, like, you know, starting at absolute zero to starting to ride the FEI levels has been much easier. And I would say, not because it went faster or because it was magic, but just because I had a sense of how to approach things methodically. I had, you know, I was working within a system that really makes sense to me, where I understood all the parts.
Right.
So once you've got that, a lot of things become possible that just seemed impossible before. That's the answer to my question to the to the big trainer with the fancy horse and the FEI stuff. Actually, is you need a system. You need you need to patiently, methodically, and in a really committed way pursue that system. And you need to take as long as you need to take.
Yeah, exactly. And then system, you know, some people misunderstand the term system. They think system is if you mechanically do the same thing with every horse every day, but in reality, system is different, right? You have to know the moving parts. You have to know the principles by which they interact, like the principles that govern that interaction, right? So it's a scientific approach.
Well, and your system kind of, it started the first day on the first clinic, which was I think you turned to me while I was riding around and you said, "How does he feel?" I just looked at you like you're in the headlights. What do you mean?
Yeah, nobody's ever asked me.
So
yeah.
I do that a lot.
Where's the blocked? What's like? I mean, like, that horse had no feel for his own body, but I had no feel for his body or my body either. So, like, that's the system. You learn to get on every day, and it's like it's sort of like running a diagnostic, right? Where's he blocking? Can I bend him? Can we go forward? Where am I feeling resistance? And then that tells you what you have to do today.
Right, exactly.
And what you have to do today is not, today I will teach tempes, or today, like, that just seems to, if you just work the details, you just do the little basic boring picky stuff, someday in the middle of things will be going really well, and you'll just think, oh, I'm going to try this, and it's there. And I know that, like, that happened a number of times in our lessons, where you would say, and at first, when we first started, it felt like magic. Like, you would start with something really, like, boring, say, and I would be sitting there and I'd think, okay, this sounds kind of crazy, but fine, like, I trust you, so let's do this. And then always, without fail, 35 minutes later or 40 minutes later, it would turn into the most like far out thing that I never thought I could do. But you got to build it. And so I learned, like, you got to build it. Yeah. And so in lessons, we'd be doing something. Say, well, try this. And I'm like, well, we don't do this. And just like, just try it. And I tried and it would work. Yeah. And I remember one day I was by myself with Griffin, and he had been so hard, right? Like every single thing, his answer to everything, his first answer that usually went on for about 6 months was no. Here, can you bend here? No. Can you move your quarters? No. He would just no. And then one day he would just decide, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so we'd been working, and he was at the point where he was doing good canter half pass and flying changes. And he could do a version of the pre-St. George thing, that half pass out, change, half pass back. But I thought, I'm just going to ride down the middle of the ring and see if I can do a couple of those in a row. Right. And he just did them.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought, wow, like this is incredible. But it wasn't incredible because we'd actually been working on it for 3 years.
Yeah.
It was
every single thing we'd done since the first day was leading us there. Yeah. And if you make sure that every step you take is all headed in one direction, and everything you do to make every step as good as possible, then once you get a fair ways down the road, you've got a lot of stuff in the bank that you can draw on. So
yeah, we have to build a foundation first, right? And we spent a lot of time putting all the little functional pieces of the puzzle into their places, so that then you have a box full of tools that you can pull out, and then you can assemble them into a zigzag half pass with flying changes. Right. And it's not really that surprising. It just looks surprising to somebody who doesn't understand how things work together, because you seem to be working over here on something really boring, and all of a sudden you do something fancy over there.
And it just happens easily. It flows.
But it's logical, because that fancy thing had all the boring little pieces that you put in place.
It's built on all these ingredients that you've polished.
Exactly. The fancy movement can become a test to see, okay, let's see how far we've come with, all the little basic stuff we've done. Do we have all the ingredients? Are they good enough to put it together to something, a little bit more advanced? Or do we have to go back to the basics and, because it's not working yet?
Yeah, and that's, with my current horse, who's very talented in a lot of ways, but, we got hung up on the flying change, and that was partly my fault, I think, because I got a little uppity and sort of started playing with it, I think, before it was ready. So once you go a little bit, down a bad path, you got to dig yourself back out again. So, finally getting the clean changes with him was entirely not about writing more changes. It was about breaking it down to the most, like every single piece of his body, accounting for it, and being able to control it, and make sure that all the pieces were in place. And when that finally happened, we went from a case where he was doing late changes behind about 80% of the time, to this year where I've been told by 2 FEI 5-star judges in a row that his flying changes are a highlight.
They are, yeah. Now he knows them, now he has the technique, and the pieces are there, right? The ingredients to that cake, they're all there, so you can do it. That's nice. It's rewarding. It's fun, of course, and to see, how well it turned out. And of course, Scorpio, doesn't have some of the physical handicaps that Griffin had, but he also doesn't have the baggage. Griffin was already pretty frustrated and pretty annoyed, and had no interest in.
Annoyed is an understatement.
And he was sort of intolerant, and didn't put up with things very easily. So, and that took a while to overcome that, to change his attitude towards the work and change his thinking.
To get him to open his mind to it.
Yeah. And then once he had.
And I would say that, one of the things I learned from Griffin is that Griffin's response, as frustrating as it was absolutely legitimate.
Yeah, exactly.
He'd been told, like, you know, he'd been racing and then they'd send him off to the hunter ring, and, you know, he'd been jammed around and forced to do things that were uncomfortable and unsupported. And then, you know, I came along and I was well-meaning, but I know that, you know, for instance, what I know now in retrospect is that when I, you know, turned him loose on all those Charles de Comfy exercises without having prepared his balance first, like without, you know, I was asking Griffin to do things that I had completely not prepared. And his frustration and discomfort with that were right on the money. He was giving me great data. I just didn't know what to do with it.
And I think the thing was, you were just kind of running right into writing the exercises without really knowing how to modify them for where he was. Because all exercises, as you know now, can be modified. You can make them really simple for a horse or much harder, depending on how you ride them, what elements you put in.
Yeah, exactly. You know how to interpret the data now, the feedback of the horse. You know what it means.
And you know what to do with it now too. Like when he, you know, has one difficulty, you know what that means. You can read that and you understand where that comes from, and then you know what you can do about it. You've learned this.
Yeah, it's the why behind everything.
Exactly.
And actually, we've been talking about our online courses because people have made so much progress there. You know, a lot of people say you can't learn to ride online, it's not possible, and so on. But
and actually, that brings me to another thing, because we skipped a big important part of this, which was that you've been riding with us all this time, but we moved to Germany in 2009. So 2010, sorry, 2010. Forgive me.
Yeah, I had about like 6 weeks in total with you over between October and the following spring, and then you moved. So but that was funny when we were there in October, and I was like, this is great, this is the best month of my life, I don't want it to end. And then I found out you were doing Skype lessons with another student, and I was like, that's a thing, I'm going to do that. And I have like zero technical ability. Like it's not even zero. It's a negative. Like I have no capability whatsoever. But I was on fire. Like there was no way. Once I found out that this was a thing and you could do it, there was no way I was not going to do it. It's like I had these hilarious conversations with you know, like with computer nerds in computer stores, and I'm like, how do you do this? And the technology's gotten a lot easier, and they're like, well, I don't know how you do this, and I'm like, I know it can be done, and I was just relentless. I was like,
that's another reason why you succeeded. Like, don't let anything stop you, right? Instead of taking it as an excuse and say, oh, it can't be done, it's too hard.
Or a sign that you shouldn't be trying to do it. You just say, well, I'm just going to find out how. I'm just going to do it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. If I'd had to get my own satellite, I would have done it. Like
dedication.
Well, but that, I mean, what I found is exactly what I wanted. You know, like you get into dressage and there's the ideal, right? That it's there to train every horse, and that, you know, that it's supposed to make the horse better and more athletic. And then you go to competition and you get a completely different experience, which is kind of, not exclusively, but overwhelmingly, you must buy an expensive horse and you must have the right trainer, and you must, you know, it's a completely different thing. And I just, you know, I don't have the financial resources to just keep buying really expensive horses over and over again. And I'm not sure that even if I did, that's something I would align with my values.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, and Griffin and Wizard, my schoolmaster, they kind of showed me already that a lot of the time the problem isn't the expensive or not horse. It's the rider, it's what's on its back. And so, you know, and while it's true that, you know, if you go out and buy if you're lucky enough to have a really expensive horse with beautiful movement, you're going to enjoy the benefits of that. But I've noticed that a lot of people who go and do this, not everybody, but they go and get that horse and then they ride it down. Like they're riding it 10% in show terms below probably where it should be.
Right.
And I kind of decided that what I wanted to do was take, nice, reasonably priced horses and ride them up. So that me and the horse we were gonna try to ride to the best of our capability on every movement. And I'll probably always get beat on the extended trot by people who have, who spent over $100,000 on a horse, but they don't beat me on the on the small stuff.
On your
my haul.
Yeah, the movements. Yeah.
And that like the halt, the rein back, the turns on the haunches, and the walk pirouettes, the transitions. All the stuff that's the meat and potatoes of any test. Anybody can learn how to do really well, and if you get really consistent at it, you can. Then, if the person with the expensive horse isn't showing the same attention to detail, you can beat them.
Yeah, very true, very true. And what I was starting to say with the online courses, people have made so much progress that was unexpected. They were surprised themselves. I mean, they surpassed our expectations. I mean, we know that the system works, of course, but when you do that course the first time, then you're kind of curious too to see how much of that people can take and apply and put into effect. And I was thinking probably the reason why it was so successful is because in a normal practical riding lesson, you can teach a lot of the what and the how, but you don't have much time to go into the why. And in these online courses with these videos of theory and stuff, we can really lay out the why in great detail. And with you, we did that now over 8 years or 9 years of consistent weekly lessons, so that works too. But in a 3-month course where you can lay it all out and people can just study it at their own time, and it fills in a lot of background information, then all of a sudden the practical lessons make sense. And of course we give them practical exercises to go and apply that theory, and then they see how it works because they have the theoretical background in a much more richer detail than what you could do in a weekend clinic, for example. Like when you rode with me in Edmonton, I probably wasn't able to give you a whole lot of why and theory in as background because we were busy doing things, right? And I had to tell you now do this and now do that and now feel for this. There was not.
And she just had an hour a day, lesson.
Yeah. Here in Germany, it's often just a half hour, 30 minutes, so there's very limited amount you can do in terms of what, why, and how. You kind of have to select one or two and go with that, right? And then you have to leave, the rest.
Right. Now,
well, what I would say is that, I don't have any sort of, there's nothing about me that's, naturally super talented for riding. So.
No, me neither.
Right.
But what I do have is like I like to know why. If I understand the principles behind something, well, you do this. Like if it just gets presented as a fetish, do it. Do this. Like hang on the outside rein or whatever. Like that doesn't work for me. So I have to know I will do what I'm instructed to do. So if you give me something to do, I will go and do it. And I think, I was shocked by how amazing the results were in like 3 months on the course from people just doing that. Like, here's the ideas, here's some stuff to do. And the people who faithfully went and did it and did the work every day, their horses are carrying themselves.
Weren't the results impressive?
Like it's amazing. So
yeah, I didn't mention for our viewers, but we brought in Kristen as a teaching assistant in the course, And so that because she's been writing with us for so long, along with another one of our longtime students, Marcella. And so Marcella and Kristen really got to help and give feedback, and they really witnessed this whole transformation of these riders.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating to see. And I mean, yeah, Kristen and I are like in a lot of ways in that I didn't have any talent really as a teenager either when I started. I didn't have my own horse. I had to ride these lesson horses in the riding clubs in Germany. They were, stiff and just average Womblets at the time. And but what I did have was also that desire to learn, the drive to become a good rider. And I read all the books, and then I tried to figure it out. It's like I can't do something if I don't know how or why or what. I can't just get on and do it like some people. I can't watch somebody and then copy them. I mean, to a small degree, but not really, right? Or I can't take all the fuzzy explanations, like more this, more that, rounder, more forward, and I,
bring them through with more inside leg, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I need a little bit more, and I need to understand the mechanics. Why does that work?
Right.
And then when I have this mental image of this is how it's connected and this is how this works, then I can acquire the feel that I didn't have, right? So it's one of those myths that you can't learn feel, and I did learn feel. I just taught myself with the help of the horses.
Well, you taught me too. I remember really early on you said that. You said, you can't teach feel, but you did.
Yeah, in a way we learned through that you can. And we realized that we learned feel, or especially you did. I had some natural feel, just
Jana's more talented than I am.
Yeah, just inborn. It doesn't mean I didn't have to work on it, because no matter how much natural talent you have, you still have to work at it. Exactly. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere in your writing.
Yeah.
But we really, in talking about it, we realized that Thomas feels. He was born with no feel, no talent, and he had to really develop it. But he did. He did. He learned it. He taught it to himself.
It's the same thing. I had to find a way, around my limitations, or around the limitations of the situation. I just had to find a way to figure out how to do that, how to learn to ride, how to get better, how to get there. That was always my big goal. I want to be a good rider. I want to know how this works.
Right.
That was my life goal, kind of thing. And I had to find a way to do it. Right. I mean, I was lucky that I had good teachers too, and but it was a lot of hard work too.
Yeah.